In episode 2, we'll start out with the aftermath of what happened to Hassan after his father, quote, committed suicide. He gets a knock at the door from an officer named Inspector Dumal. And after Hassan opens the door, Inspector Dumal's a dick. He starts to try to bully a 16-year-old kid. He tells Hassan to pack his things up because he's taking him to social services. But as Hassan starts packing up, he decides, yeah, I'm not really interested in doing that, and tries to sneak out the window into a neighbor's house and down a flight of stairs. The only problem is Officer Dumal is onto him and jacks him up. He takes Hassan to the group home, where the head of this group home gets him all set up. He's even nice enough to give him a Bible. A little after that, the head of this youth home ends up seeing him reading the Bible and is pleased. In reality, though, he's not really reading the Bible. He's got a Lupin book hidden inside. But there's a reason he headed over there. It's because they found a suicide note in his father's belongings in prison that was for Hassan. And it's his father admitting to everything that he was accused of. The man, though, has come bearing good news. An anonymous donor has come forward donating the tuition fee for one of the most prestigious schools in France for Hassan to go to. He tells him it's too good of an opportunity for you to pass up. You have to go. You have to try to make something of your life. And on one of his first days at this new prestigious school, a couple of rich kids try to just give him a hard time, but one of the other students tells the bullies to kick rocks. He introduces himself as a guy named Benjamin Farrow. And Benjamin is the antiques dealer that helps Hassan out. He's the guy who made the necklace. He's his, go-to friend. And present day Hassan is kind of having an issue with Ben. Ben has examined the necklace and tells him it was never broken apart. And that really upsets Hassan because if the necklace was never taken apart, then the story about the gems being scattered around the world is complete bullshit. His father was innocent and the necklace never left the Pellegrini's safe. Ben tries to tell him, man, you made it out. I mean, does that really even matter? But it does matter to Hassan. For 25 years, he lived with the fact that he thought his father was a thief when in reality, he doesn't think he was. So Hassan knows he needs to get some answers. And he knows just the person to contact, Juliet. Juliet goes to visit her mother because her mother and father have since divorced. And her mother isn't exactly broken up about the fact that the necklace once again went missing. She tells her mom, though, no one's worried, the police have a lead, but Madame Anne's point is Hubert owns most of the newspapers, so she can't trust them. Anne starts kind of insulting Hubert to Juliet, and she says, could you stop? He doesn't hate you. But Anne says, that's just because I know where all the bodies are buried. She also knows that Hubert took it really hard when the necklace went missing 25 years ago, which means he's probably going to take it even harder that it happened a second time. When Juliet leaves this meeting with her mom, the man at the front desk gives her a note that gives her a time and a place to meet with the direction of no police. Of course, the note was left by Hassan. And it's a very public place in a park. But before Hassan meets her there, he starts calling in a bunch of food orders with a bicycle delivery service that he happens to be dressed like one of their drivers. After placing these calls, he bikes over to Juliet and tells her, I don't want money, I want answers. And that's when he reveals himself as Hassan. He's also noticed, though, that she did, in fact, bring police. She's bugged. And he covers that, which the microphone was hidden in a brooch on her jacket. And the police captain is freaking out a little bit because of the fact that they can't hear this conversation go down. The first question Hassan asks is, why did you lie about the necklace being taken apart? And Juliet tells him that it was a story that her and Hubert concocted to try to drum up more money when they eventually sold it. Her father ended up finding it from a jeweler in South Africa 5 years ago completely intact. She warns him that if Hubert finds out that Hassan is behind this, he's dead. She begs him to just give back the necklace, and she promises she won't tell the cops that she actually knows him. The last question he has is, please, tell me my father was innocent. But she says, no, I'm afraid he wasn't. He signed a confession. I'm afraid that you don't know your father like you thought you did. Hassan, though, knows that the police are closing in, and he takes off, biking through the park as a bunch of police officers chase on foot. But luckily for him, he anticipated this, and all of those bicycle delivery men end up showing up at once, confusing all of the police, and they don't catch Hassan. It leaves the captain infuriated that he got away, and Hassan just dumps the outfit and walks out of there like it never happened. He heads back to where he keeps all of his outfits, and he's kept that suicide letter from his father. And he's noticed something. His father misspelled a couple of words, and his father never misspelled words. He thinks it's a clue. The two words that are misspelled are comet and libraries. And upon doing a little research, Hassan had found that there was an inmate that was in prison with his father named Comet, and he worked in a library. He takes it to Ben because he's convinced that this is a sign, but Ben doesn't think it's anything. He thinks it's just misspelled words. Benjamin tells him if you want answers so bad, then go visit this guy because he's still in prison. The issue is he's too sick to leave his cell, which means that Hassan is going to have to get into that prison. He sets up a meeting with another inmate who doesn't look anything like him other than the fact that they're both black, and he tells him that, and Hassan proposes that the two switch places. And he's worked this out perfectly because the guards, well, they just switch shifts, so they're not going to notice that the prisoner they're taking back isn't the one they brought there. As far as this prisoner, well, he's only been there for a week, so the rest of the inmates won't really realize it either, and he's getting transferred to another cell. Works out beautifully. There is only one issue. The prisoner, Traore, well, he's handcuffed. And Hassan acts like he never thought of that, putting his hands over his, using his lockpicking skills, taking the handcuffs off, and putting them on himself. Right before he leaves, though, he tells him, "I know what you're in for, and if I catch you selling so much as a joint, I'm going to find you." He then yells guards, and the switch is complete. Now that he's inside, though, he has to find Comet. And he starts asking around and is able to get the cell number, but he's attracted some unwanted attention. Two of the prison drug dealers are eyeing him up. Hassan was able to get a job in the prison pretty quickly delivering sheets, but when he goes to Comet's cell, he finds out that he's once again in the infirmary, and his cellie tells him, "I don't think he's coming back." This is yet another hurdle that Hassan has to get over because now he has to find his way into the infirmary to talk to Comet. But as he's walking away from Comet's cell, that's when the two drug dealers show up, demanding to know who he is, and he gives them a fake name. They tell Hassan that the man whose identity he stole owes him 1,000 euros worth of drugs, and he has 3 days to get it to him. They really don't care that Hassan isn't this guy. Hassan agrees, figuring that he'll be out of there within 3 days. He then goes to the guard and complains that he's already sick to get himself in the infirmary. And he tries to sweet-talk the doctor to get a night's stay in there, but she just figures that he's scared being in prison, not agreeing to admit him for the night. So he needs a legitimate excuse in, and he walks up to the two drug dealers and tells them that they can stick the money up their ass. And that's when they shank him. So Hassan has his way into the infirmary. And that night, he is finally able to talk to Comet. He tells him who he is and who his father was, explaining that the two were in prison together at the same time. And Comet recognizes who his father was, but Comet tells him that his father was alone in his cell under surveillance when he killed himself. He explains that he only met his father once when he brought him a book. He does tell him, though, that when he returned the book, he did instruct him to keep it, just in case anybody ever came looking for it. And he still has the book, it's just in his cell. So the next day, when Hassan is doing his rounds with the sheets, he once again heads back to that cell and looks around, and sure enough, there's an old Lupin book. When Hassan gets back to his prison cell, he starts combing over this book looking for more clues, and he finally finds it. His father had stained certain words. And when you put the words together, it reads out, "I am innocent. I was trapped by Anne Pellegrini." He then hides the book, though, because they're handing out food. Although the guard spits in his and says that drug dealer who shanked him will be around later that night to, quote, tuck him in. They then have to go out for a rec in the yard, and Hassan leaps up to try to dunk a basketball, but ends up tearing open his stitches. So he has to head back to the infirmary to get re-patched up. He asks the doctor if he can say hi to Comet, and she agrees. He tells him that he found the book, and Comet asks for a favor: to make his wife smile. He agrees, and then he says his goodbyes to the doctor. And it's not a goodbye, I'll see you later. It's a goodbye. Now it's time for Hassan to plan his escape. Now, while Hassan was getting himself put in prison on purpose, Juliet is also trying to find some answers. She heads to her father's place, where she asks him if it was really Hassan's father who stole the necklace 25 years ago. And he freaks out at her, screaming, "Of course he stole the necklace from us." He apologizes, but he just feels like it was a betrayal. That kind of question coming from her because they're so close. Now, back to the prison. That night when the guards go to, quote, check on Hassan, but really let the drug dealer in and beat the shit out of him, Hassan isn't in his cell. In fact, he's hanging from the shower in an apparent suicide attempt. They rush him into the ambulance to a local hospital, but Hassan isn't dead. In fact, he didn't even try to commit suicide. This was all part of the plan to get out of the prison. He had swiped some pills from the infirmary when he tore his stitches open that slowed his heart rate down. And when he wakes up, he waits for the ambulance to stop at a red light, and he just hops out the back. The first place he heads the next morning is Anne Pellegrini's. He's able to sneak in using a key card and confronts her, and she is very surprised to see him. He demands to know what she did to his father, and she admits that she made him sign a confession. She tried to explain that it was better to be guilty and free than innocent and in prison. She did it because she thought that he was going to get a reduced sentence if he did so, but it turned out the judge was a hard ass. His father couldn't accept the fact that the confession that he was forced to do ended up being his downfall, and he committed suicide. She says aloud that she was naive because there were agreements made, but he cuts her off and says, "Agreements are only good for people like you. They're never good for people like my father." She tells him that after his father's death, she tried to help him. She did it from a distance and anonymously, but she did. And that's when Hassan realizes that she was the private donor who helped him go to that school. A big reason why she did that was because she wanted to earn his forgiveness, along with his dead father's. She tells Hassan that there was a police officer who swore that he'd help him, but that police officer lied. And when Hassan pressures her for a name, the name she gives up is Officer Dumont, the same Dumont who put him in that group home. Hassan asks her why would Dumont exploit the fact that he knew that his dad trusted Anne, but she doesn't have an answer for that one. He then leaves. He knows he needs to fulfill his promise to Comet. He sneaks into his wife's tiny apartment and puts a giant gem on their wedding picture. He then returns to his headquarters and starts looking up what happened to Lieutenant Dumont. And then finally, for the police, well, the captain's having a tough go of it. After the failed attempt to get any information from the exchange between Juliet and Hassan, he calls Juliet in because he's pretty convinced that Juliet knew who this mystery man was. But Juliet claims that she doesn't. And when he continues to press her on the matter, she says, "Okay, I'll tell you what I told him. I told him the officer in charge was a moron," and then she leaves. But Yusef hasn't given up on the Lupin connection. He realizes that a lot of the names connected to this are anagrams for Arsène Lupin. He tells another police officer named Sophia about this theory, but she thinks it's ridiculous. And that night, as everyone's packing up to go home, they start kind of making fun of him for that theory. Thank you so much for watching this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you thought it sucked. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up soon. And please be nice in the comments section. Nobody likes being told they suck, even if it's true. Oh, and sharing's caring.